Welcome to the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast. I am your host, Ann Alston, and it is my pleasure to bring quality programs to all of you. I am here again with another amazing speaker, and I'm very excited to be having a podcast again this year with all of these amazing speakers. So I want to encourage everybody to please visit and listen to all of the podcasts that are posted on the website this year. These people have such tremendous information that you cannot miss. So please take advantage of this unique opportunity. Just in case you did not know, the purpose of the Businessmen and Women of Color podcast is to share industry information, network our businesses, and to encourage career seekers who are thinking about getting into their line of work. So we also want to take a moment to thank our corporate partners and sponsors, which are a family of authors, Butler Armstead Consulting Solutions, Human Resource Learning Center, J&F Enterprises, and Women Offering Wealth, along with many of our other business partners and sponsors who's helping to make this event a success. So today we have in our Authors Cafe another published author out here who's written a book, which I'm really interested to find out. I actually saw his ad posted in Facebook, and there was a spiel in there about his book, and so I reached out to him and said, hey, I need you to be on my podcast, and here he is. So I want to introduce everybody to Johnny Brown Lee, known as Slen K, the Renaissance Man, okay? And Johnny is from Pompano Beach, Florida, and he is a professional in his own right. He's a graduate of Florida Atlantic University with a degree in political science and urban and regional planning. He's also the former director of the FAU's former agency, Black Student Union, and Multicultural Programming. While he was in college, he helped create and develop programs and events and continually fought for student rights and multicultural rights. He's also a ghostwriter, contributor, and blogger in 3 different sectors for a number of internet magazines, talking about hip hop, social issues, and relationships. In addition to his many accomplishments, he's also the co-founder of the Men Molding Men and Always Be a Lady mentoring networks for teens and mentors, the Brownwood Urban League Young Professional Network, and he's a co-founder and emeritus member of the MLK Youth Celebration Committee for the city of Fort Lauderdale. So that was a whole lot that I said about Johnny, but I want him to tell us more about him. So Johnny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
you are so welcome. So tell us, who is Slen K, the Renaissance Man? How did you come up with that name?
Sling K is not. I didn't actually come up with it. It's a nickname given to me by one of the guys from my neighborhood. Just one of the older gentlemen that used to be around, and he was like, as a kid, I was like real active, real hyper. So I used to jump around and flip off of everything and whatnot. And he basically just took it and stylized. Remember the child's toy, the Slinky?
Yeah, I remember the Slinky. That's one of my favorites,
Okay.
actually.
So he just took that and stylized it because he was like, I used to jump around and spring off of everything. So he started calling me that. And then he made it like a deeper meaning. Like later on in life, he would say that he said as he watched me grow and whatnot, I would bend but not break. I would fall over stuff and whatever, but always bounce back. And he just kept making it deeper, and I just kind of kept it. So when I became a open mic poet, it was my name, and it lasted me from middle school all the way to college. And once I became a speaker, people knew me as it, so I just kept it.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm not even going to talk about the nickname my mom gave me because that is nothing in compare to your name. And I'm really happy that you have that name. Especially if your elders feel like, and you said something critical, that you're able to bounce back, that you're very flexible. That is an awesome way to give someone a nickname and a meaning to that. So tell us about your book and why you wrote it, and how did you come up with this concept?
Okay, well, the book was, I like to tell people that I really didn't write the book. I basically let people write the book for me. and I organized the book. That's how I tell people, but I'm the author, of course. But what happened is I was the director of Black Student Union and Multicultural Programming at Florida Atlantic University. Florida Atlantic University is a small, well, at the time I would say it was a small little predominantly white institution in Boca Raton, Florida. Wasn't a lot of diversity at the school when we first got there, and I was a member of the Black Student Union, right? And the Black Student Union started to grow and get really big to the point that we became the largest, as far as we know still, the largest student organization in the country, and we had one of the biggest budgets. We had this 600-member Black Student Union at this small, predominantly white institution, less than 10% black at the time, and a $200,000 budget. Well, we started going to conferences, and people would ask, "Well, how do you do that? How do you go from being a club to being an agency? How do you get 600 members on a small campus on a what's the other thing that was about the school? It was a commuter campus. How do you get that many people? How do you get that many black people? How do you get that kind of money?" So when we first used to go to conferences, there used to always be just Black Student Leadership conferences, so Black Student Union conferences, or NAACP conferences, or on occasion there'd be like a Caribbean Student Association conference. So people would ask these questions about, well, how do you run your organization, and how do you do this, and how do you do that? And when that would happen while I was in college, I was basically professionally speaking while I was in college. I would hit up all these conferences, or I'd be invited to schools to speak about how do you do this and how do you do that. And when I first started doing my workshop, I didn't even have a format. I used to just go in front of people and let them ask me questions and see how we could help them out.
Wow.
And then after I graduated, the same questions would still come about, and I was still going to these conferences, and people used to tell me all the time, "You need to put that in a book. You need to put that in a book." So I finally took the time and sat down one summer and compiled all of this stuff and all of these problems that we had been dealing with since I had been in college, without even really realizing that everybody was really dealing with these problems. So once I got to the point where I finally put it in a book, and I finally was able to narrow my workshop down and hone in on these 6 particular problems, that's when I started to realize, I was like, yeah, everybody's really dealing with this, and it's not even just about minority student organizations, because even when we would go to predominantly white student government conferences, they were dealing with the same things, and they didn't have the answers either.
Okay. So let me ask you, what are some of the fine point problems that led you to want to put all this stuff in a book? I know there are many of them, but I want you to kind of elaborate on some of the finer points so that the people who are listening can really get an understanding of the full scope of the issue.
Okay, well, first and foremost, it was, like I said, first and foremost, a market developed for it. Like I said, because people, every time I would speak, it was easy when it was a few times a year when somebody would be like, "That would be a really good book. That would be something somebody needs to hear that." Right? But then it got to the point, especially once I started becoming a national speaker, and I started going like outside of the state of Florida. People were really serious about it. They were like, "Yo, like that needs to be in a book," and it would be like whole conferences telling me that this needs to happen in a book, like teachers and advisors and everybody. They're like, "You don't have that written down anywhere?" And then also there was the point that besides it being, like I said, people asking for it, other things started to happen that made me realize that, yeah, it really does need to be in a book, because I couldn't find a book to tell people to go read about what I was telling them. And one of my mentors told me, he was like, well, if you can't find it in a book, he was like, and nobody else can, then it's probably your book to write. And he was like, and you should start focusing on that very soon. He was like, because this might be the thing that you use to change the world. So that sparked it, and I had to get it out the way then.
Okay. So once you got all of all of these issues in your book, what was the general impact of people who actually read all of these issues, and how far did you take it?
I'd like to say that as far as how far did I take it, I still use the book. I still do the workshop. It made my workshops bigger. But I still use it as far as in the book, because the book is basically the living, breathing workshop almost. Except for I can go a little bit deeper into detail with things that I wouldn't normally get to talk about, or an extra story I might not get to tell in an hour-long or a 45-minute long workshop at a conference. So as far as the book, it opened up new doors and it exposed me to a brand new audience. It almost became like my resume, like my calling card, because people would find me now instead of me always having to go find them.
Right, right. And so, what type of feedback did you get? Or, matter of fact, I should actually ask the question is, once they saw your book and they heard you speak, have anyone walked up and said, okay, here's some solutions to some of the problems and actually done something about them?
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you like this: most of the people that read the book have heard me speak already, right? A lot of people that have, because a lot of people buy the book after they hear me speak at a conference or something like that. But there have been people that have read the book and came to me. They actually met me at a conference. I met a few advisors like this, and they were amazed because these were things that they didn't know were necessarily going on, or they didn't have they knew there were problems at their school. They just didn't have the thought process of how do we solve that problem. And a lot of the things that are in the book is I like to say it's written from a student perspective, because a lot of these things were things that students would tell me that were problems at their school, but they didn't know how to approach their advisor. They didn't know if they could approach their advisor, or they would say that nobody listened to them and nobody had an answer on how do we solve these things.
Okay, so based on the title of your book, Getting Out of Your Own Way, is that the main reason why some of these problems existed?
Yeah, a lot of them are just, it's a lot of things that we can really solve the problems. They're not really even that hard to solve. It's just a matter of we overthink them, or we don't think about them at all, or sometimes we're in denial about what these things are, and sometimes we think the problem is just too big. But I mean, like, it's certain things you can break into smaller sections and we can attack it this way. Or we just get caught up with doing things, well, it's always been like that. It doesn't always have to be like that, though.
Okay. And so when you're doing the workshops, you're generally just talking about the issues, and do you also collaborate with other professionals that offer solutions to help them recognize that this is a problem that can be resolved doing a certain method or a tool or whatever the resolution is at that time?
At the moment, I don't. Usually, when I go to a school or to a conference, at the moment, it's been all me as far as dealing with these issues. I've had, like I said, I've done a few workshops or a few training sessions where it's all advisors, and sometimes there's some pushback because I'm not, because they believe at the beginning, usually at the beginning of a workshop, advisors or administrators, because I've done a few conferences where it's all administrators, or sometimes I'm there for the students, and after I've done the student workshop, I get pulled into a room with all advisors and all administrators, and then they'll be like, please do that workshop for them. But usually at the beginning, there's some pushback and some doubt that because I don't have a master's degree or a PhD in college administration or student affairs, that, well, what can you really teach me? What can you really what can you talk to me about that I don't know about my students? Then you start to tell them what their students just told you in a room a few minutes ago, and mouths drop open, and people are caught off guard. So as of right now, I don't even really know of anybody else. And like I said, I've been doing this for a while now. I don't even know of anybody else that really does a workshop even similar to this in on the speaking scene. And I've been to quite a few conferences, and I find other people that do student leadership workshops, but it's something completely different from what I do.
Okay. Well, first of all, I applaud the fact that you're trying to take on all of these different issues that's happening in that environment. That can be an overwhelming undertaking that you're doing because you're getting so many different pieces of negative energy. And I want to also encourage you to please offer solutions or get with people to offer solutions to some of these problems, because a lot of times there is a lot of talk that goes on, but sometimes a solution and an actionable solution is one of the things that can help. And I think that by putting it all in a book, that they have something tangible that they can actually sit and look at and really digest it and say, okay, I know that this is the problem, but we need to make sure we have a resolution to that. So talk about some of the other things that you help in relation to your book that might be a little bit different, but talk about some of the other things that you do for people as well.
Well, like I said, we can stick with even with just the books, right? The book is about 6 very particular problems that student organizations usually face, right? And when I can go down the list of the 6 real quick. Then the 6 things that most student organizations usually face on college campuses is they usually are facing a what we call a knowledge problem, what we call a historical problem, a respect problem, a pledge process problem, a participation problem, and a cooperation problem, right? And if you want, I can go back and I can break down a little bit what each one of those problems entails. But in addition to that, there are things that we take for granted with being involved in the whole student organization process and what we get out of being in a student organization and what it leads to after college. So I get to use my book for a whole lot of other things, even outside of college, even as an alumni and as a professional, because a lot of people that are really involved in things, they used to be involved as a college student also. So whether they're in government or whether they're running a social organization, these people used to be really, really involved in something else, and they took that same training, and now they're using it on a professional level. So I get to show people that what you do with your college organization and the things you fight for on your college campus, those things carry over into the real world.
Absolutely.
For you to do other things with.
Right, absolutely. And I definitely agree with everything you're saying, because here's the issue that I'm seeing just listening to what you're saying is that between faculty and students, there's no cohesiveness there in terms of equality, how they're being treated, how their learning experience is, how the faculty members are perceiving students' behaviors and things of that nature. And that's one of the things that we have to break out of and realize that when you're in a college environment, a teacher is there to help you learn what's going on, and the student needs to embrace it. But if there's issues like you're saying that's going on in the colleges, it makes it very hard for someone to feel motivated to finish out their tenure in college or even just to teach. And I want to work with you, and I'm hoping everybody else who's listening to this podcast to work with you to help solve some of these issues, because we need our future people, our students who's going to come to these colleges. They're going to be excited to go to college. They don't want to have a lot of drama, like you're saying.
Right.
And they want to feel like that they can get the education they need, and they can trust the facilitator and the professor that's supposed to be showing them this is how it is, because they lead by example. And so I want to use this platform, and hoping everybody will listen to this platform, to say, if you're experiencing this in a college right now, what can you do to resolve the issue, and not just talk about it and have a meeting? What can you offer that is actionable and that can be taken, where it can improve the environment where college students and faculty are? And that's really key.
And I'm glad you said environment, because a lot of times it's not only about what happens in the classroom, right? A lot of students, their biggest fights are not so much the classroom, it's the rest of the college environment. So it's the programming that happens, it's the culture, it's the cultural awareness, it's the diversity, it's that type of stuff that really, really bothers them. And I've always, one of my advisors in college used to tell us all the time, he was like, your education is not only about what happens in the classroom. He was like, all of these experiences that you go through outside of the classroom, they will shape you just as much as the textbook. So when I go to colleges and we're talking about funding, or we're talking about programming, and we're talking about collaboration, and what speakers that the school will bring in, and what performers they'll bring in, all of that matters.
Yeah, it does matter. It really, really does matter. I'm sort of 50-50 on that part about, what you learn is same as textbook, because I think that part of the problem, and this is just me in my opinion, I think part of the problem that I'm seeing now today, and it's not focused particularly on colleges. I just think that people and the generations of people have shifted so far off the grid that there's a lot of misunderstandings between what we used to do in terms of fostering education and what young people are valuing today. Um, I think that that's a huge shift. It's definitely evident in the way that young people value their education, their future, and things of that nature. And then you have people who are like myself in the generation that I'm in, who believe in strong education, but we can't use old tactics or new things all the time.
Right.
And I think I think that's part of the bigger problem of why there's such a disjointed communication line of what you're talking about.
Well, I would also say this. Well, because you said you're strong on the education piece, and I agree with that, right? But most of us, when we think about college, I was going to say, we think about not only, like I said, when we was talking about the performers and the programming that come in. You have some like at a lot of schools, you can have, they'll spend millions of dollars to bring in comedians. They'll spend millions of dollars on homecoming to bring in performers and singers and entertainers to entertain you, right? And they'll have no problem spending that money. But when it's time to bring in the educational speaker or the motivational speakers and things like that, like for Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month or Women's History Month, all of a sudden they get really, really cheap about bringing in anything educational. And it's like, if you can't bring in somebody educated on at an institution of higher learning, then where are they supposed to get this stuff from? Because they'll spend plenty of money to bring in XYZ rapper to disrespect every woman on the campus and talk about all kinds of craziness, but in a month designated for upliftment and empowerment, or just any time, it's real hard for the students to get their educational fix. So they'll fight you tooth and nail about bringing in a speaker or a performer that uplifts the community, I should say.
Yeah, and you know what? That has always been the trend, believe it or not. We have gotten so used to catering to that type of thing that you're talking about, having comedians come in or having people who are in high power positions that can represent them to say, hey, we were able to bring in a senator or we were able to bring in somebody who is up there. But when it comes down to just general education, it's like, it's like you wrong and you right, or you do or you don't. You're not going to get that because it's one of those things where it fosters something that could potentially make us better. And I'm not afraid to say that our community, although we have many people like ourselves that is going out here and advocating for these things, the clock has started to tick backwards. And we have to maintain the fact that we are more than just a bunch of comedians and athletes and people who they identify us with the norm. That's how I kind of feel about it. And I think part of it, that what you said in terms of how that is not happening where you see it happening, where we need that extra information, that extra thing that we need to grow, it's not happening. But platforms such as the podcast is a method so that we can do that. And I'm encouraging everybody to create their own platforms so that they can continue doing it just like you do with your book. So I want to turn the conversation now to your co-founding the Molding Men and Always Be a Lady Mentoring Network. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, no problem. Well, that got started based on I got invited to was it a summer camp, I believe. One of my friends was doing a summer camp, and I guess they did like a little career day or something, and he had me and a few of my other friends. They became friends, but me and a few other people were at this summer camp, and we basically just talked to the kids about what it is we do and whatnot. And at the end, he was kind of just sharing with us, and he was saying thank you and telling us how big of an impact, and he was glad to see black men show up for the kids, because he was saying his students don't get to see enough positive black men. And he was just telling me, he was like, it's a sad thing. He was like, if you were to ask them what they admire, he was like, too many of them would honestly tell you and have no regrets about it. They would say that they admired drug dealers. And he was like, and there were a whole bunch of his young ladies that they admired strippers. He was like, these are girls like 11 years old talking about they want to be a stripper. He was like, they haven't even gotten to high school or to college and figured out what career paths are available to them, but they've settled for these things already. And I just thought it was it was real sad to me. And one of my other friends, his name is Devin T. Robinson. He's a speaker also, and he had this thing at the Urban League, and he asked me to come and speak to a bunch of young guys that all of them wanted to be rappers. Everybody in the room, that's all they wanted to be, and they were between the ages of 12 and 18. So I sat and I talked with them, and I asked them a bunch of questions to see what they knew about the music business and what they didn't know, and gave them information, and we just talked. And it was a bunch of other guys there that day that did other mentoring things with him. And at the end of the day, all of us were just reflecting on the day that was, and we were like, yo, this was a really fun day. It was really empowering to uplift the kids, but it helped me grow also. And we were trying to figure out a way that how can we do this more often? Because my friend Devin, he didn't have anything planned for this to happen like weekly or monthly or anything. And I believe he was getting ready to move away at the time. So he gave me the contact information with the guy at the Urban League, and we built a relationship, and we started setting up a program so that we could speak at the Urban League on a regular basis. And we would go and speak to, he had a group of kids that would come through as a class of them, and they were kids that were, they're kids that are basically troubled. Some of them may have a court case or something, so they're going through this process to try to not end up in jail, essentially. And we would talk with them and mentor them through this process. And then what happened? That was how the men's one started. And a few of my, I used to get a few of my friends from college to come, a few young ladies, because we used to do a bunch of things with the guys. We would teach them how to tie a tie and match a suit, and how do you talk to a young lady properly. So we would bring in older girls for them to talk to. We would blindfold them and tell them to talk to the girl, and then have the young lady tell them everything they did wrong or that was disrespectful or why she would have never given them their phone number. And after the girls saw what we were doing, they would say, well, we need to do something like this for young ladies. And I completely agreed with them. So I set it up with the Urban League, and we began making a program for young ladies. That's how the Always Be a Lady and Men Molding Men Mentoring Networks was born. And the way we set it up was that it was basically no excuses mentoring. It didn't require you to be there every week, didn't require every month. It was the Urban League would tell us when, and a group of us would go.
That is awesome. I'm going to have to go step back to the part when you talked about how 11 and 12-year-old boys and girls are fascinated with prostitution, gang members, and while many of us consider that to be a negative profession, it's a profession nonetheless. However, my bigger question is, where are the parents? Where are the parents? Why are these kids fascinated with that, and have they been exposed to opportunities, as you said? But we're not here on this podcast to judge those parents. But I will say to that is that we have to think outside the box and change our mindset and say, okay, yeah, my kid might be fascinated with drug dealing or prostitution, but I'm going to show him or her some other avenues. I'm going to show them the opportunities that they could have and show them how easy it is to obtain it. Because a lot of times our kids, they make decisions based on their own devices, with or without us. They will listen to us and they will take what they want from it. But in the end, it's going to be their decision which way they go. But we are the influencers. And so if we are allowing them to just only focus on this one thing, they will never know the many talents that they have overall. Some kids have 4 or 5 different talents. But if we don't let them know that, hey, did you know that you can do this, or did you know you could do that? That's where we start to change things for a positive outcome. That's where we make a difference. And I want to encourage people on this podcast that I would say Johnny is on to something. You need to connect with him so that you everybody can work to build this up, because What I'm hearing in this conversation is that not only is it starting from when they were younger, but they taking all of this into the college, and then they get that same behavior in college, and then they translate over into the workplace, which is why we have problems with managers and staff. And
Bingo.
we have to stop that cycle. We have to stop the cycle, because if we don't stop the cycle, we're never going to value who we are and what we value to do. So let me ask you, Johnny. This is a networking event, and so for everybody listening and for people who are participating in this podcast, what do you need to help further your cause?
Ah, more opportunities. I need more opportunities to speak with. I really do. The more people I can get in front of, the better the chances are. I need to talk to more students. I need to be at more colleges. I need to be at more conferences, because if I can help them learn how to navigate their student government, then I can show them then we can show you how to navigate real government and real government meetings, and the value of being involved outside of college, right? So, because I tell people, if you can be involved in student government, right, you'll have no problem understanding how to navigate a parent-teacher meeting, or a school board meeting, or a county meeting, or a housing authority meeting once you get out of college, right? And if
Right.
we can get into the middle schools, and we can talk to the kids that when they're trying to make their decisions, and we can tell them that easier that, well, a lot of kids make their decisions on what they want to be in life based on money and money alone. And that's a
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah, and it
right?
is a problem. But I also want to add to that, it's not only just going into the schools and talking to the kids, the parents also need to be there to reinforce some of the
That's true.
things that is coming to light, because while we can go into schools all day, we're going to be looked at as any other teacher that's going on. But we also need the help of the parents to help reinforce these things so that it sticks with them, and they can grow and foster, and they can take what they need from it and develop. And that's where my passion comes in, and we both have like the same type of passion I'm hearing in your voice about how you can get in front of people and really get this message out. And I'm hoping everybody who's listening to this podcast to please contact Johnny. His information is on the bottom of his page. Make sure you go and get his book, because we all need to understand what are the issues that's going on in college. How can we come up with a resolution? And you can only do that if we know what the issues are coming from Johnny's book. And so, for that, Johnny, I would like to thank you for being on the podcast today. You definitely got me fired up on here thinking about what I can do and contribute, and would like to work with you in the future to help with that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, because like I said, when we're talking about the kids, like I said, too many of the kids they only focus on the money, but they don't realize what else is available to them. So when we talk about hip hop for them, I like to tell them what else is available to them besides just being the artist. You could be a manager, you can be a producer, you could be a DJ. There's so much in the music world. You can learn to shoot the video, and what they don't realize is so much of this requires an education. The majority of the music world is not just the entertainer who may or may not have went to college, and more of our entertainers are now college graduates, right? So we like to tell them that to be a producer or to be a studio musician, you may be required to go study somewhere.
Absolutely.
So they need to know that.
Absolutely. So everybody, please make sure that you reach out to him. I know I done said that 3 times, but I'm really serious about it, because we need to start fostering our small businesses, and for the people who are out there helping other people. This is not just a networking event, this is an acting event. And so I'm challenging you to enact and be proactive with working with different people. So make sure you listen to all the podcasts, visit all the pages, and reach out to me or reach out to Johnny if you have any other questions. So Johnny, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.